Hello! So today we will discuss about the Republic Act of 1006 or the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009, which will be presented by Mecca Carriaga and me, Princess Fabro. So the National Cultural Heritage started or begun and held in Metro Manila on Monday, the 27th day of July 2000, and this is an act providing for the protection and conservation of the national cultural heritage, strengthening the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, and its affiliated cultural agencies, and for the other purposes. The RA 10066 was enacted during March 26, 2009, and signed by the President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and it was approved during March 26, 2010. So for the purpose and objectives of this Republic Act, it is to protect, preserve, conserve, and promote the nation's cultural heritage, to strengthen the role of the cultural heritage in national identity and pride, establish institutional support and mechanisms for heritage conservation, and to provide resources and authority to cultural agencies and local governments. RA 10066 covers both tangible and intangible cultural heritage, whether publicly or privately owned. This broad protection ensures the preservation of the Philippines' full cultural spectrum from physical monuments to living traditions. So first, let us talk about the tangible cultural heritage. So first are the built heritage. These are man-made structures that reflect the architectural, historical, or cultural identity of a place. They include historical buildings such as old churches, colonial houses, government buildings, and ancestral homes. Bridges such as Spanish-era stone bridges or other civil works of cultural value. Public spaces like plazas, parks, fortifications, and an example for that is the Intramuros and the Fort Santiago. And lastly, industrial heritage, old mills, lighthouses, and also railway stations. Next are the movable heritage. So these are portable cultural objects that can be preserved or displayed in museums, libraries, or archives. An example for that is artworks such as paintings, sculptures, carvings from various periods. Next, manuscripts and documents, handwritten texts, books, codices, or printed materials of historic value. Artifacts such as tools, ceremonial objects, clothing, jewelry, and weaponry. Last are religious items such as church bells, icons, retablas, and processional images. Lastly are the archaeological and paleontological sites. So these refers to sites or location that contains remains of ancient civilization or prehistoric life. First example is the archaeological sites such as cave dwellings, burial grounds, ancient settlements like the Tabon Caves as seen in the picture. Next, paleontological sites such as locations with fossils or prehistoric animals or early human remains. So these areas may be declared protected zones, and excavation or exploration requires clearance from the National Museum. Next, we'll proceed with the intangible cultural heritage. So first example are the oral traditions and expressions such as epic chants like Hudhud of the Ifugao, Darangan of the Maranao. Next, proverbs, riddles, folk tales, and oral histories. Lastly, traditional ways of storytelling, especially among indigenous communities. Next are the social practices, rituals, and festive events. An example for that are the religious practices like Pahiya, Sinulog, Ati-Atihan festivals. Second, rituals for planting, healing, or honoring the dead. Lastly, indigenous rites and community celebrations. Next are the performing arts like traditional music, example, kulintang, gandingan, bamboo instruments. And next, indigenous and folk dances like tinikling, singkil. And lastly, traditional drama, chant, and performance forms. Lastly, for the intangible cultural heritage, the traditional knowledge and skills. For example, weaving, pottery, boat building, metalworking, medicinal knowledge and healing practices, and lastly, traditional cuisine and preparation methods. Next, for the important classifications of the RA, we have first, National Cultural Treasures or the NCT. It is the unique, outstanding, and significant cultural properties declared by cultural agencies, and it is the highest level of protection. The important cultural properties or the ICP. These are properties with exceptional cultural, artistic, and historical significance not as rare as NCTs but still highly protected. Next are the heritage zones or HZ or historic centers. So these are specific areas designated for their concentration of cultural properties. They may include old town centers, ruins, streetscapes, and the presumed important cultural property that all structures over 50 years old are presumed important and protected unless declared otherwise. Next, we will discuss about the mandated cultural agencies and their roles. So first, the National Commission for Culture and Arts or NCCA. These are the lead policy-making and coordinating body for heritage matters. Next, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines or the NHCP. They focus on the built heritage and historical sites. Next is the National Museum, a custodian of movable cultural properties and natural heritage. Next is the Cultural Center of the Philippines or the CCP. This promotes performing arts and culture. And lastly, the National Library of the Philippines and National Archives. So they are responsible for preserving books, documents, and records. For the registry and documentation, a Philippine Registry of Cultural Property, PRECOP, is established. All cultural properties, public or private, must be registered. LGUs are tasked to maintain a local cultural inventory and submit this to the NCCA.
Now, let's look at how RA number 10066 protects and preserves our cultural heritage through key measures. Export and maintenance. First, movable cultural properties can be exported without approval from cultural agencies. This prevents heritage loss to other countries. Also, both private and public owners are required to maintain and protect their cultural properties. Neglect or damage can lead to penalties or government takeovers. Next, support for private owners. To support conservation, the law gives incentives to private owners like tax exemptions, grants and loans, and even recognition or project funding. This encourages more people to actively participate in heritage preservations. Next is education and promotion. The law also pushes for education and public awareness. Heritage topics are also included in school curricula. Communities are encouraged to join local programs, and research or documentations is actively supported. This builds pride and understanding of our identity. Next is prohibited act or penalties. Violations include destroying or altering heritage sites without approval, illegal exports or sales of cultural items, or not reporting accidental discoveries. Penalty range from fines, imprisonment, confiscation, and even business revocation. RA number 10066 empowers agencies and local governments, raises cultural awareness, and strengthens our identity as a Filipino. It provides a system that promotes heritage conservation not just for today but for the future generation.
Next, we will proceed to the review of projects, programs, and activities or PPA. So, one implemented project named Restoration of the San Agustin Church and Museum in Intramuros, Manila was initiated by the National Historical Commission of the Philippines or the NHCP. So, the goal of this project is to preserve and restore the structural and historical integrity of San Agustin Church, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and National Cultural Treasure, by adhering to the conservation guidelines under RA 10066. Next is to enhance public appreciation and tourism value of the church and its adjacent museum. The key implementation of the project: restoration work funded and supervised by the NHCP, strict guidelines followed for materials, design, and historical authenticity, coordination with the Archdiocese of the Manila, and heritage experts. So, San Agustin was also included in the Philippine Registry of Cultural Property or the PRECOP. And for the outcome, to successfully restore the church historic interiors, paintings, and structural integrity. It has improved museum displays, documentation, and visitor engagement. And lastly, it served as a model for church-based heritage conservation across the country. So the second example for an implemented project is School of Living Traditions, SLT, the Tiboli Dream Weaving in Lake Cebu, South Cotabato. So it is initiated by the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA. So their goal is to preserve the traditional art of tinalak weaving among the Tiboli people, an indigenous group in Mindanao. Next is to ensure the integrational transmission of intangible cultural heritage by training younger community members. To establish an SLT center in Lake Cebu where master weavers teach young apprentices. So documentation and promotion of the rituals, songs, and stories associated with weaving traditions. Recognition of cultural bearers under the Gawad sa Manlilikha ng Bayan or GAMABA program aligned with the law's intent to protect intangible heritage. So the outcome of the project is that they successfully revive interest among youth in traditional weaving, preserve a vanishing indigenous practice while supporting livelihoods through heritage-based tourism, enhance cultural pride and identity within the Tiboli community.
Next, I will be presenting a review of how Republic Act number 10066, the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009, has been both violated and successfully implemented by public agencies and private organizations. Let's begin with two cases of violations. The first is the Mehan Garden development in Manila. Mehan Garden is one of the oldest parks in Manila and was declared a historical site by the National Historical Institute. Despite this, it faced threats from proposed development projects that includes commercialization and infrastructure changes, all without proper coordination with the NCCA or the NHCP. This violates the Section 48 of RA 10066, which strictly prohibited altering or modifying heritage structures without the approval from the cultural agencies. Additionally, any development within the heritage zone must go through the Heritage Impact Assessment, which were neglected in this case. Another example is the Intramuros wall leasing incident, also in Manila. The Intramuros administration allegedly permitted the leasing of parts of the historic walls to private commercial establishments. This was done without undergoing the required conservation procedures or the consultation with heritage bodies. Intramuros is designated heritage zone and a national cultural treasure, allowing private use of protected cultural structures without clearance from the NCCA violates Section 48 of the law and puts the site's authenticity at risk. Let's look at successful examples of RA 10066 implementations. In Bataan, the Cultural Heritage Preservation Division of the provincial government launched the Cultural Heritage Awareness Program. This initiative promotes knowledge about the province's history, traditions, and cultural identity through public educations and campaigns and events. This in line with Section 31 of RA 10066, which encouraged local government to support heritage education and awareness. Another success story is the conservation training conducted in Siquijor by the National Historical Commission of the Philippines. The NHCP hosted a 5-day workshop on conserving both movable and immovable cultural properties. The training involves local communities and aimed to protect historical landmarks like Lazi Convent. This reflects the goal of Section 7 and 37 of the law, which promotes capacity building and community involvement in heritage conservation. Now that we've looked at examples of both violations and successful implementations of RA number 10066, let's explore their impact on the host or recipients' communities. We'll analyze this through 4 components of the environment: social, economic, physical, and institutional. First, the social environment. In provinces like Siquijor and Bataan, PPAs had a strong positive impact. They helped raise cultural awareness and engage the youth and fostered pride in local identity. On the other hand, In Manila Mehan Garden and Intramuros cases, there was a negative impact because communities felt excluded from heritage-related decisions, leading to a loss of identity and disempowerment. This aligned with Section 2A of the law, which promotes national pride in heritage, and Section 31, which encourages community participation in culture. Next, the economic environment. Heritage conservation can support sustainable tourism, creating jobs for local guides, artisans, and vendors. In areas like Bataan and Siquijor, this opportunity have emerged from successful cultural programs. In contrast, Intramuros leasing historical walls for private commercial use prioritize short-term gains. This compromises cultural integrity and may lead to long-term economic loss due to diminished heritage values. According to Section 2F of RA 1006, cultural heritage should be used as a strategy of sustainable development, while Section 47 regulates the commercial exploitation of heritage properties. Now, the physical environment, which refers to both natural and built heritage. In Siquijor, the conservation of Lassi Convent helped preserve its historical aesthetic and structural integrity. It is a great example of heritage preservation in action. Meanwhile, unauthorized development at Mehan Garden and leasing parts of Intramuros walls threaten the physical authenticity of these sites. This violates Section 7, which protects immovable cultural properties, and Section 48B, which prohibits unauthorized alteration and damage. Lastly, the institutional environment. In areas like Bataan and Siquijor, there was a strong collaboration between LGUs, national agencies like NHCP, and community members, showing the power of interagency cooperation. However, in Manila cases, there were clear signs of weak coordination and lack of enforcement, which led to violation despite the presence of laws. RA 10066 addresses that in Section 16, which mandates local government units to create cultural inventories and coordinate with the NCCA, and Section 37, which support institutional capacity building.
Now for the conclusion. So for the advantages, strong legal framework for heritage protection. So RA 10066 provides a comprehensive legal basis for preserving both tangible and intangible cultural heritage. In San Agustin Church restoration, the law enabled the NHCP to act decisively under Section 5, Protection of Cultural Property, ensuring historical authenticity and structural integrity. Second is support for intangible cultural heritage, or ICH. The success of the School of Living Traditions reflects how RA 10066 recognizes and supports intangible cultural expressions as mandated in Section 14, which calls for the transmission of cultural knowledge and skills to future generations. Next, for the advantages, institutional coordination and funding. The law strengthens the roles of national agencies like the NCCA and NHCP, which are empowered under Section 4 to coordinate and fund heritage initiatives. Both PPAs succeeded due to clear agencies' mandates and access to technical and financial resources. Next, community empowerment and local involvement. So RA 10066 emphasizes community participation, evident in Section 16, which requires local government units, or the LGUs, to establish cultural inventories and collaborate in safeguarding heritage. This is reflected in the community-led nature of the SLT program in Lake Cebu.
Let's start with the advantages of the law. First, it actively promotes preservation through educational and conservation programs. A great example of this are in Siquijor and Bataan, where cultural trainings and awareness campaigns have been conducted successfully. Second, the law empowers local government and community to take part in heritage conservation. It encourages public participation and collaboration with agencies like NCCA and NHCP. And finally, it helps strengthen cultural identity by promoting appreciation of historical sites and traditions. It builds national pride and awareness.
Next, for the disadvantages, limited enforcement in private and remote areas. While the law mandates protection for all properties over 50 years old, Section 5, Part 3, enforcement is weak in areas with limited government presence, so some private owners may neglect or alter heritage structures without consequences, unlike in high-profile projects like San Agustin Church. Next is funding and capacity constraints. The SLT programs, though successful, often rely on limited funding and face sustainability issues. While Section 18 allows for financial aid and grants, not all communities have the capacity to access or manage them efficiently. Lastly, for the disadvantages, uneven local implementation. Although Section 16 obligates the LGUs to maintain local cultural inventories or LCIs, many municipalities lack trained personnel, heritage officers, or the political will to comply. Without these inventories, cultural properties may be left undocumented or unprotected, especially in rural areas. Lastly, dependence on cultural agencies and initiatives. Much of the law's success depends on proactive agencies like NHCP and NCCA. In areas where these agencies are inactive or under-resourced, implementation lags. For example, build heritage in less urbanized areas doesn't always receive the same level of attention as sites like Escolta or Intramuros.
Now, let's look at the disadvantages. One major issue is the bureaucratic process. Approvals and permits of the heritage-related projects often takes time, causing delays. There are also limited awareness. Many LGUs and communities are still unaware of the law's details or how to comply with it. And perhaps most importantly, the penalties of the violations are often weak and poorly enforced, and which limits the law's powers to deter violations. In terms of limitations, the law lacks strong enforcement and monitoring mechanisms. Even with clear rules, there's still little follow-ups to ensure compliance. It also heavily depends on the local government units and their capacity or willingness to act. If the LGU is inactive, heritage protection suffers. Lastly, there's the ongoing struggle to balance heritage conservation with commercial development. This tension is especially visible in cities like Manila, where historic sites are often at risk.
For our final insight, RA 1006 is a progressive and essential law that has enabled impactful heritage programs such as the restoration of landmark structures and the revival of indigenous traditions. However, its success is context-dependent, thriving where there is active institutional support, local participation, and funding, but faltering where capacity and awareness are low. To fully realize its goals, the law needs stronger enforcement mechanisms, capacity building at the local level, and increased grassroots engagement, especially in underrepresented and remote communities. And that is all for the Republic Act of 10066 or the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009. Thank you.